The water at the bottom of the tower looked harmless, green-blue and still, the way a hotel pool looks before the guests wake up. Above it, a staircase rose like scaffolding into a Kansas sky bleached by August heat. The slide was so tall it needed red aircraft lights at the crown. Attendants snapped webbing straps across empty seats and tugged until the hook and loop held. A raft, yellow, 3 seats in line, waited on the launch deck under a traffic light. Red, then yellow, then green. Families climbed in clusters and peeled apart at the top when the scale told them who could ride together. The signs said the raft needed a combined weight within a band printed in plain numbers, not less than 400 pounds, not more than 550. The raft would drop with gravity and the push of water, crest a hill, and settle into the runout like an airplane landing. That was the promise. Tallest in the world, a thrill slammed into shape by ambition and German bravado. Verrückt. Insane. Sunday, August 7th, 2016. On the platform, a boy in a blue shirt reached for the front seat. He was 10, the son of a Kansas lawmaker who had walked the park that morning, trading turns on rides with their children. The boy's name was Caleb. 2 adult women, strangers to the family, took the second and third seats. An attendant pulled a belt across Caleb's small chest, then another across his lap. The belts were fabric and Velcro, not hard restraints. The attendant checked each strap by feel, gave a thumbs up, and stepped behind the rail. The raft nosed into the mouth of the chute. The light clicked green. A push sent it over the lip. The first drop fell like a cliff, more than 160 feet. The raft's nose buried in spray and lifted like a cork. It skipped across a shallow pool meant to bleed speed and carried that speed toward the second hill, a curved hump under a mesh tunnel braced with steel hoops. The tunnel was the hedge against flight. People watched from the platform, the stairs, and the ground by the runout. The raft climbed the second hill faster than the shape of the water wanted. The nose angled up. It rose. The raft went airborne. In that fraction, belts held bodies to seats, but bodies still moved because belts flex and shoulders lift. The front of the raft reached the overhead net and the first steel hoop. It hit. The sound was like a bat striking a pole. The chute shook. The raft slammed down crooked and kept sliding. The women in back screamed. Lifeguards ran, whistles cutting the air. A staffer threw himself into the water at the bottom and grabbed the bow to steady it. The operator hit the kill switch. The chute drained in a rush that left slick patches and the smell of hot plastic. Silence came too quickly. Then voices split the quiet. Orders, prayers, first aid training layered over panic. Attendants tried to keep guests from looking. It was not possible. A call went to 911. Security spread arms to hold back families who had laughed minutes earlier and now stood with hands over mouths. An EMT among the guests asked for a backboard, then stood hard because a board would make no difference. The 2 women were bleeding and crying, their necks struck by the netting and hoops. The boy in front was gone, decapitated by the impact. Police and ambulances arrived. The raft sat half-cocked in the runout, water lapping against it like nothing had changed. Officers taped the area and documented it as a crime scene. The park closed the ride and moved people toward the exits with apologies and free drinks, gestures that could not touch what had happened on the tower. News trucks came before the sun got low. They had a simple picture: the tallest slide in the world, a TV-boosted build, a boy with a broad smile from his school pictures, and a family who had arrived together that morning and left in different vehicles. By nightfall, the child's name, the father's office, and the way the raft had flown under a tunnel meant to stop flight were everywhere. The state looked at its rules. Kansas had long sold itself as friendly to business, parks included. Inspections could be done by a park's own hired experts. Reports faced little outside review. Rides could be added or modified in ways that made engineers elsewhere shake their heads. Verrückt had not been born on a drafting table in a slow dance with calculations. The idea came first, from a co-owner who loved speed, and the math came later. Early tests sent sandbags flying. A Travel Channel segment turned the build into entertainment. The bracing and the net were the fix. Investigators walked the stairs and read logs. They checked the human part, training sheets for seasonal staff, procedures for weighing riders, what happened on busy days when groups formed at the top. They measured the hump and water speed. They recreated the load that morning, compared the posted weight range to the distribution in the seats, and asked why there was no over-the-shoulder restraint on a ride that could send a raft into the air. They laid the torn seat pads on a warehouse floor and traced the gouges where hoops had ripped through. The park said Verrückt would be dismantled and removed. For the family, there was only the work of arranging a funeral and answering questions, as if answers might change what had happened. The parents spoke, briefly, about a boy who loved baseball and church and wanted to ride the tallest slide in the world because that is what 10-year-olds want, a story to carry home. Lawsuits followed. The companies stamped on the slide, the park, the design firm, the builders, the makers of the rafts, moved from press releases to court filings. The family reached settlements with several parties. Money covered bills and created scholarships and let parents step away from work. It did not move the weight off their chests. 2 years later, a grand jury returned indictments against the co-owner who had driven the project and the lead designer, along with the corporation, alleging reckless disregard for safety standards. The documents read like a catalog of shortcuts. No full engineering review, no testing to failure, changes on the fly when early rafts flew, reliance on fabric straps and a shared weight range instead of restraints that accounted for the size of a child in front. In 2019, a judge dismissed the charges, saying the grand jury had been shown improper evidence. The criminal case ended there. The facts did not. By then, the tower was gone. Crews took Verrückt down a piece at a time, starting at the crown and working through bolts baked in the sun. The skyline lost a landmark. The gates opened without the slide on the map. Parents scanned height markers with new caution. Attendants repeated seatbelt checks with a different tone. A state that had once said yes to thrill first, and questions later rewrote parts of its law and spoke the new words slowly. The story ended in a church where a small casket rested under colored light, and in a house where a bedroom stayed the same long after the funeral, and on a staircase where staff could no longer climb without remembering a morning when the water at the bottom looked harmless. It ended in a maintenance shop where a worker boxed a bag of fasteners with the ride's name and turned away. People come to parks for a clean kind of fear, the drop that steals breath and gives it back. The compact is simple: terror inside a boundary, danger the engineers have already thought through. On that Sunday, the boundary failed. A boy who trusted it paid with everything he had. The world's tallest water slide became a headline and then a gravestone. If you stand on the concrete pad where the footings were cut and capped, you hear traffic, kids in another pool, and wind through chain link. It sounds like any summer day. It also sounds like a warning. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.